Well, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, so we are talking about leadership and structure of the Lord's church. And last week we talked about eldership. Remember that? We're looking at the different, we were really talking about the elders last week. So we're going to talk more about them today. You missed it, Ron. We're going to talk about that. What were some of the different ways to describe the role of elder? What were some of the ways we described that last week? Remember what they were? Pastor? Well, that was good. Okay. That stuck with you, huh? Pastor, shepherd, overseer,
Leader.
I suppose, right? Leader, okay? Yeah, I'm gonna put that right. I'm gonna put that here. How's that?
Presbyter.
Presbyter. Ooh, that's nice. Man. That's nice.
Check your spelling.
Yeah. Presbyter, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, I think that's right.
Close enough.
What was another word that the King James uses for that?
Bishop.
Bishop. Remember that?
Shepherd.
Shepherd. We got shepherd.
An elder.
That's the word presbyter. Presbyter is elder.
Elder. Yeah.
That's the word for presbyter.
Yeah, that's right. We had these. Yep. Elder and presbyter. We talked about that. But this idea meant what? What was the definition of presbyteros? What did that mean in English?
Senior.
Senior. Oh, very nice. Yeah. So it meant the more senior one, the most experienced one. We kind of interpret that as being elder as well. Bishop kind of went with this idea of overseer. And what was this? What was this word in the Greek? Remember? Epis.
Oh, that's
Kapos. Remember? And epi means what? Epi.
over, around.
Epidermal.
Over.
Right? Skin. You get that? Around. Over. Kopos. Watcher. Overwatcher. It's like, but that's probably a better definition. We talked about this name, right? Bishop had been kind of given to the role of an overseer. So this word really means overseer as well. And then this word pastor, it's kind of a transliterated Latin word for shepherd, basically. You think about the pastor is out in the pasture. What's in the pasture?
Sheep.
The sheep. You have the shepherd and the pastor. You see that? You see those two words are kind of synonymous. So what we learned from that, and we're going to look a little bit more at this today, is these words are all interchangeable for the same role. We see the first time it's really mentioned in the Lord's church is in Acts 11. We talked about that last week, where they were taking up an offering for the saints in Judea. And where did they send the offerings to? Who did they send the offerings to?
Elders.
The elders. Hold on to them, right? Distribute them. Look after the flock, right? So you see this idea of looking after the flock, right? The elder, the most senior ones, were looking after the flock. So you see kind of an interchangeability there. We talked about 1 Peter 2. I think John brought this up last week. 1 Peter 2:25. Let's turn there. We didn't really look at that, I think, in depth. Let's look at 1 Peter 2. Actually, if we go back to verse 24, 1 Peter 2:24, it kind of takes this idea of shepherd and overseer and puts them into one thing. Now, it's really talking about Christ in this case, right? But it's this idea of that overseeing and shepherding are two synonymous things. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we might die to sin and live to righteousness. By his wounds you have been healed, for you were straying like sheep, but have now returned the shepherd and overseer of your souls. Right? That's not the one John brought up. I apologize. But this idea that, these are synonymous terms here, right? Synonymous concepts. And then the first time we see another early example we see of elderships being set up in the church is in Acts 14. Let's go ahead and turn to Acts 14. Sure I have the right verse here. 23. Yeah. So yeah, let's look at Let's look at verse 21. Start at verse 21. So we're in Acts 14, verse 21. Can someone read 21 through 23? Nice and strong.
I can do it.
Sure.
They preached the good news in that city and won a large number of disciples. Then they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, strengthening the disciples and encouraging them to remain true to the faith. We must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God, they said. Paul and Barnabas appointed elders for them in each church, and with prayers and fasting committed them to the Lord, in whom they had put their trust.
Thank you very much. So what do you see? This is the first time we see elders being appointed or being established, right? Back in Acts 11, we know they existed. First time we see them existed. This is the first time we actually see them being established, being appointed. And what do you pick up from that? What do you read there in that? What concepts can you gain from that? If we're going to emulate the first century church, I'm sorry?
In the beginning, they preached
They were preaching the gospel. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Each church would have its own elders.
Yeah, that's what it looks like, right? Because what's it say there in verse 23? They appointed elders for them in where?
Each church.
Every church, not in the big town, not in each state, not in each province, but what?
Each church.
Each church. That's what it looks like to me here, right? That's what it says. So, hey, let's try and do that if we can. What else do you glean from that?
Well, that they had to pick them because they were discerning enough to know who was qualified and who wasn't. These
Yeah.
are new churches.
Remember, this is brand new. You're going to establish elders in the church and you're going to go off and leave them. That's a pretty big task,
Right.
don't you think?
Well,
Yeah.
they're coming from such a different, they either could have been old school Jews that
Right.
were that way, or they could have come from maybe a pagan background. You don't know. That's why they
Yeah.
picked them.
Well, what do we know about Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch?
Not good.
Those are Greek,
Greek gods.
Yeah, I mean that was not in Judea,
Mm-mm.
right? So these are areas that are you're establishing the church here, right? Interesting. It says appointed elders, plural. Talked a little about that last week, right? Does it say appointed an elder in every church?
No.
Appointed elders in every church. Now, I mean I don't want to get too, legalistic here, but it sure reads that way. Again, we talk about the fact that it's always talking about a plurality. That word's always plural, unless we're just talking about an individual for some reason. So we can glean from that hey, maybe we should have a plurality of elders, right? That's where the whole concept of the Presbyterian church comes from, right? We talked a little bit about that last week. Remember, that was an early Protestant church. And if you're going to break off from the Catholics, one of your key things is you're not going to follow the Pope anymore. You're going to have a plurality of presbyters.
Yeah.
Presbyterian church, right? We talked a bit about the Episcopalian church. Remember, Episcopos, instead of following a pope, we're going to follow
Overseers.
overseers. You see the different, where these churches come from, what their whole concept and their birth, idea came from, right? We're going to leave a papacy, we're going to go to an idea of presbyters or overseers. So that's where those names come from. And we see it here in the early church being formed. What are your thoughts about that? Yes, sir.
Well, I've always had a hang up on the words elders. Elders. Well, like this, I believe there should be more than one, but then they have to have believing children.
Look at that.
Children can be one child. So I see the words kind of.
When do we?
I believe
Yeah.
in child, but they say children. Well, that means more than one, but it can only be one.
Yeah. Is it every child? I
Right.
mean, yeah. There's a lot of judgment that comes into
Yeah.
this, isn't there? And it's a point of debate and discussion a lot of times in the church. I think it might have come up last week, right at the end of our discussion, where what happens if you become somebody say if your children fall away, or if you
Right.
become an elder later in life and your children are grown, and we can have some discussions and debates about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts. It appears to me that we're going to look back at the qualifications again. That it lays out the qualifications pretty clearly, and we should pursue that. Looks like we should seek that out, right? Because if we decide that, hey, I'm going to make some exceptions here, and I'm not going to follow that to the law, I think we're going to cut some slack, and then things go wrong. Who owns that?
But
Who owns that decision?
I
If you
think
don't
that
follow the template,
if you follow it so closely to that, like what you're saying, the pool of men that you have is so narrow
yeah.
that I don't even know if you would be able to have someone that
Yeah.
truly across the board they filled every qualification without fail, and maybe they did 9/10 of it, and maybe that was the one hang it that they had a child that didn't go to church that wasn't a believer, or
Yeah.
they'd fallen away or whatever. So I don't know.
Well, let's go ahead and go there. Let's go to 1 Timothy 3. That's where we really left off last week. We've kind of caught ourselves up to where we were. So these are great points. You know, it's funny how things evolve. Share a little story just from my business life. I remember when I would say late 80s to the late 90s. It was really hard to get a supervisor job. You know, if I remember the company I worked for, to become a supervisor was quite the accomplishment. You know, back in the, I got my first supervisor job in 1996. I remember, man, I just worked and clawed, and scratched and sacrificed and interviewed and everything. And I got that first. I was like, man, I made it to a select group. I felt really good. Like that was quite an accomplishment. It was a milestone in my life. That was not easy to do back in those days. You know, would you guys agree that I've been working out? They're throwing director titles around now and VP titles around now like they're M&Ms, like they're Skittles. And they mean nothing. You know what I mean? It's like it's funny how things evolve over time. You know, and I kind of get this in a similar way. It's like, you know, this is if you read these qualifications in 1 Timothy 3, this is acting us to be pretty selective.
Right.
This is pretty selective. This is not, you know, these are, you know, I think a humble person would look at this and say, I don't know if I meet all these. You know, I worry about the guy who says, I meet all these. You know, they're looking at humility. Goes, I don't know, I mean, above reproach, blameless. Look back at my life. If I've lived long enough, I'm like, gosh, there's got to be something back there, right? Yeah.
I was just gonna mention too, like when you get married, it says that you leave your mother and father and you become one flesh. So I think at that point, I don't think your parents have anything to do with your faith, but there's so many. It's so much going on.
Yeah. Well, okay. Great point. Great point. I can't say I totally
I
disagree.
don't know.
But on the other hand, we're asking somebody who's senior and has a lot of years and experience, and what influence have you had on your children? Even if they're adult children, the closest people in my life are my children and my spouse. The closest people in my life. If I don't have enough influence on them to even make a difference in the direction of their life, I'm gonna hand over shepherding of a bunch of strangers. You see, you know, you can make a real argument there that, man, and that's your first qualifier right there. What influence have you had on the people who trust you the most?
Correct.
And if you didn't have enough influence on them,
You don't qualify.
I mean, I don't think so, but that's my 2 cents. You know, again, if we want to make some exceptions there, we own that. Then. You know, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll give you my thoughts. What's your thoughts?
I told you, right? I just think that at some point you've narrowed the pool down to where it is almost impossible to fill those shoes. I mean, and then so that your children are followers. What about your grandchildren?
Oh.
I mean, at some point, and then, like she said, when you get married and you leave and cleave, and you've gone over here, of course, you know, my mom and dad still have an effect on my life, but not over what I do. Now, if you brought them up in the right way, and I have one son that's not baptized, one that is baptized and not going to church. So I know that we did what we were supposed to do, bringing them up. I do know that.
Yeah. So let's break this deep down this a little bit here. These are great points, and we probably won't solve them all in a 13-week class, but we understand where we're coming from. It's a lot of our goal here. Understand what the concept is, what the doctrine is, what the idea is, where we're coming from here. So if we look at 1 Timothy 3, it's a pretty. What it says here, he desires a noble task.
Right.
So this isn't an entry-level job, okay? And it's a noble task. It's a worthy, you know, thing. They break down the word noble, right? It's a worthy task. Must be above reproach. Your translation might say blameless. Husband of one wife. We talked about it last week. Really, a one-woman man. Really, is what we're talking about there. You don't have a harem,
Right.
you know. But there is a wife in the picture here. Looks like, because we're going to see longer, but we read it a little bit more where that comes into play. Sober-minded. I mean, what does that mean?
Temperate.
Tempered. Yeah, tempered. Yeah, good.
Even
good tempered.
temper.
Yeah, self-controlled. So, do we want overseers that have anger issues? Might not be a good idea.
Mm-mm.
Would you agree, Ron? He's got to keep your temper under control in this job.
Right.
Because you'll be challenged, right? Respectable.
Mm-hmm.
I think we want our guys to be respected. That's not a lot to ask, is it? Hospitable. When we first started going here, George and Elizabeth took us to lunch one day. You know, got to know them, talked, had good conversation, and break down barriers, and you know, show them hospitality. Able to teach. Don't we want our overseers to be able to at least convey some concepts,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not a drunkard. I don't know if that'd be a very good, right? I mean, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. So we're talking about people here that have a good, they manage their household well, it says that, with dignity, keeping the children submissive, so not out of control. You know, we are looking for kind of a select few guys, I think is what we're talking about. If you read all that, so people that kind of have their act together, represent the church well, don't have any bad traits here. They're gonna, you know, just like I would hand my business over to a manager, I'm gonna look for a lot of these same qualities in somebody. If I own a business and I'm not there day to day, I'm gonna hand it over to somebody. These are the kind of qualities I'm gonna look for. They're gonna manage my team, my staff, my employees. It's exactly what I'm gonna look for. It's not that hard to find, right?
Trustworthy.
Trustworthy, yeah, right. I'm putting it in your care, right? And that's a lot of what, you know, the Lord is, we talked about this a few weeks ago, right? We talked about, I'm going to go off for a while. When I'm gone, can you look after church for me? Right? For if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? And I can tell you, you know, even though I was a grown man and my parents were older and everything else, what they taught me when I was younger just echoes today, years after they passed away. I'm sure it's the same
Right.
folks that have had their parents gone for a lot longer than I have. The things they told you when you were young, I mean, they echo, you know, and I quote them all the time. You know, my dad said this, and you know. So, what kind of job did they do? Raising the people who are the most vulnerable and close to them. Well, that's a reflection of how they would do looking after this flock, don't you think? That's what that's saying. Yeah? Now, if we go over to Titus, go to Titus 1, gives a little extra, some extra elements to think about. Titus 1. So he's setting up, you know, he's writing to Titus here, and he says here in verse 5, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remain in order and appoint elders in every town." So again, we're back to this plural concept again. Now, is it talking about elders in every town or elders in every town? I mean, again, it doesn't say an elder in every town. You know, I've looked at the Greek on that. It's plural. Okay. Yeah. But it doesn't say an elder. I mean, the Greek would say an elder. It says elders in every town. It's plural. It's always plural. So we interpret it and say it's plural, and it's probably a good idea that it's plural. You know, I can tell you, I was an elder at one time, and I thought 3 was a perfect number. And that's just my 2 cents. Just my 2 cents. I thought 3 was a good number. We served at a time where there was 2, and I thought that was the worst number. I personally thought it was the worst number. I don't know if any of you guys ever served an eldership of 2 people.
No
I did not
tiebreaker.
like that. I thought it was like a seesaw. It
Yeah.
felt like a seesaw. Same 2 guys. You had a third. It was perfect in balance. You took the third out. It was like, I did never like that concept, right? And then of course you have 1. What do you got with 1?
The king.
Dictatorship.
Not a good idea. I mean, it's like, yeah. Now let me ask you a big question. Big $10,000 question. I might get a giggle out of Linda here because she knows the history. If you end up, say, God forbid, you got an ownership of 3 people and 2 men are die in a car accident. And you got 1 left. He's out. Do you have an ownership?
Yes.
I know a lot of people in church that say you would not have an ownership. and that guy has to step down.
I think.
I've dealt with that a lot.
I think temporarily it would be okay, but if one,
You need to try to find.
Yeah.
you
What's a
need
good thing?
you need to get more, because I just think that's a key.
Well, there's churches, I mean, Rob preaches in Wickenburg, and there's now been, when he started preaching there 15 years ago, there was only 2 men that went in, they were very old, and mostly ladies. There's never been men who would either take the job on, or that were qualified to do the job. And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, they're still a church, and they've been there for like 60 years. So it's an older church, and they may have elders before that I don't know about, but we haven't had any.
So what do you think? What do you do if you end up someday, wake up one morning and there's only one elder?
Try to find another one.
I agree with that,
Yeah.
personally. What's else? Anybody disagree? Yes, sir.
What we do in our bylaws is that if there's no elders, if you have one, you don't have any. But if we have no elders, our deacons are appointed to be in charge for a while until we appoint more elders. So that's what we have set up in our bylaws.
Yeah, so is there protection, right? Because in the state of Arizona, you know, you have does the trusteeship step hand over to the deacons? Is that what you do in your
But we
bylaws?
don't have any elders.
Yeah, because in the state of Arizona, if you're going to be a 501c3, you have to be incorporated, which means you have to have trustees. That's a state thing, so you're saying, well, instead of having one trustee, we're going to hand it over. I can definitely see that. I've always kind of looked at it like your goal is to have a plurality. You're striving towards a plurality.
That would be the
Right?
best.
Even if you had none, you're striving towards a plurality, right? So you get to a plurality as quick as you can. Now the legal things you might have to do or the protections you might have to put in place are very sensible, right? Because if you have one trustee or one person that can sign the bank account, it's probably not a good idea, right? It's probably not wise. So that's why you have this idea of a plurality in there. I think it's weird. It looks like it's wise to do that. So that gives you a little bit about, you'll see some behaviors in the church that come from this idea, that it's a plurality. You know, I've seen a lot of churches that don't have any. Is that a plurality?
Well,
Not yet.
No.
We have that men's group that there's 4 of them, 3 of them, Rob, and then other 3 men that have stepped up and said, yes, we need it. Someone has to be in charge. And so that's what they're doing, but they don't want to be considered a deacon or, I mean, that's their choice. But there are men who are overseers of that congregation.
Do they qualify?
Mhm.
Are they qualified to be bishops?
Mhm.
They passed the muster.
No, but they have, it's a choice. You
Oh,
know,
so they
because
decide in that case not to follow these
they
qualifications.
just feel like
but
the
to
job,
have-
yeah, that at this time in their life, they don't want to take that job on.
Better than
So,
nothing.
Is it?
Well, I mean, only, you're gonna have to have somebody handle the funds or handle the decisions or to do, you know, to be the stable, the mom and dad of, you
Right.
know, or the dads of the.
What's the thought? Maybe the elders here have dealt with this in the past. What's the idea around looking after a church in another town? Like maybe you planted a church someplace and you look after it for a while until they get elderships up and running. What do you think about that? Is that something you've done before? I've seen that done.
Done a lot.
We've done it, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But we help them get started.
Mhm.
We don't try to run their business or do anything like that. We help them with the building or, you know, that sort of thing. But they have to run it.
Yeah. You know, it doesn't say in here that he had a week in Crete. He said, this is why I left you in Crete, so that you might remain, or you might put what remained in order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you. Then he gives the thing. But we don't know how long it took Titus to do that.
Right.
Might have taken a couple of years.
It's true.
You know, I don't know. You know, especially if it's a new church. I mean, you're going to want elders from a bunch of
No,
New-
you need to be qualified.
yeah. How long it's going to take you to get to this point?
Right.
So it might take a decade. I don't know, right? But you're striving to this idea that we're getting, and there's some oversight there that's
Right.
trustworthy. So, yeah. So yeah, we could have conversation about this for hours and hours and hours. There's always an if, but, what if things that happen.
Life.
The goal is, yeah, these are the things we're striving as guiding principles for us. We see the elders being sought out to answer questions. Wait a minute, let's stay in Titus real quick. We didn't leave Titus. Sorry about that. So let's look at Titus's what he writes in Titus here. So I want to read Titus 1, verse 5 through 9. So want to read that for us? Titus 1, 5 through 9.
The reason I left you in Crete was that you might put in order what was left unfinished and appoint elders in every town, as I directed you. An elder must be blameless, faithful to his wife, a man whose children believe and are not open to the charge of being wild and disobedient. Since an overseer manages God's household, he must be blameless, not overbearing, not quick-tempered, not given to drunkenness, not violent, not pursuing dishonest gain. Rather, he must be hospitable, one who loves what is good, who is self-controlled, upright, holy, and disciplined. He must hold firmly the trustworthy message as it has been taught, so that he can encourage others by sound doctrine and refute those who oppose it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pretty much the same concept that was laid out there to Timothy, with an interesting exception, an added concept there that he didn't mention to Timothy. What is it? Yeah, whose children believe. That's interesting. What do you make of that? Verse 6. Husband of but one wife, and his children are believers.
Gotta not be babies.
Yeah, yeah,
Old enough.
okay, like that.
Or he has no children, and then they can't test what kind of people or person he was,
Okay, yeah,
or his
okay.
wife and him.
Yeah, so I don't have any children. Can I check? I hate to check off. We talked last week, some things are objective, some things are subjective, some things are quantifiable, some things are qualifiable. What do you think about this? Husband, one wife, children are believers. Quantifiable or qualifiable? Is that a quantifiable thing? Or is it a fugazi out here floating around? What is that? Pretty clear. I mean, it looks like a qualification. You know, it looks like it's measurable, right? Husband, one wife. I'm sorry. The above reproach, we could probably debate that. So that's quality, right? Quantity. Husband of one wife. You a man with one woman. Now, the interesting. Your translation said faithful. It's interesting. What translation are you reading there?
NIV.
NIV. Remember we talked the NIV is a thought for thought. The ESV, New American Standard, King James tend to be a word for word. So the word faithful is not in the original Greek. It doesn't say that. It says man of one woman. You read the actual Greek. But we said the word man and husband are the same word in Greek, and the word woman and wife are the same word in Greek. So man of one wife, husband of one woman is what the Greek says. You can interpret that to be faithful, but it doesn't say that.
Yeah, like what was there some kind of intonation that made them go that way with it? Or?
Yeah, I don't know. What was the behavior in ancient Greece in that part of the world at that time? Like, that's interesting. The NIV took that concept of being faithful. It's not, it's interesting.
I think of Noah too, I felt like he was a perfect example of
Well, that's good,
an elder,
Yeah.
I think.
Dale,
He was the only one, right?
Dale, let me go back to the children business.
Yes, sir.
You may have one child that's faithful, maybe you have two. If you've got multiple children, you may not have one that's faithful. Does that mean that man can be qualified? He came up in the family, he was taught, but for some reason, everyone's different. They don't do it. That's a
Yeah.
judgment call you gotta make.
It is a judgment call, and it's funny how it's
If you go around eliminating everything, you're really wrong.
yeah. I would say let's read on in verse 6. It gives us a little more. And his children are believers and not open to the charge of debauchery or insubordination. Ooh. So this is somewhat measuring the effectiveness of that man by how his children behave. This is that. And have you ever watched like a crime drama or seen the news about somebody that commits some really terrible act, and you go, I just want to rattle their mother, or their father. Well, what was wrong with you? Like, what did you produce here?
Right.
You ever seen that before?
Yeah.
You thought, I think about the parents, like that.
How did you turn out
How did you turn that out? And so this is not that, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like, well, what did you turn out? And how do we, I don't know, we had 3 kids. I know some people have 1 kid. We have 10 kids. I mean, the more kids you have, the more variables come into it, and the more likely things,
The odds are that they're
the
not.
odds are something's going to go bad. I've thought about that a lot. So, I don't know, there is some judgment there. But this is talking about how you do in your own household. What are the results?
But like you said before, these are things that we're supposed to attain, try to
Try
get.
to change it.
And so if they get 9 out of 10, and maybe they have 3 kids, and one of them, not that they're like an axe murderer or something, but if they're not faithful, does that disqualify them because they fit every other thing? You know, I've known them people that have said because their spouse died and then they got remarried, they didn't qualify because now they've had 2 wives. And I'm like, but he only has 1 wife now. It wasn't like he had multiples. You know, so I don't know.
To me, it's answered back in 1 Timothy 3, verse 5. For someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for God's church? At what point does it stop being your household? You know, that's the question.
That's true.
You know, that's it's like, and I will tell you, you know, when I was a young guy, you know, when I went off to college, I, you know, had I was raised in the church, but there was a few years where I went, you know, I'm away from mom and dad, and I'm going to do whatever I want to do and play rock and roll, right? And then you wake up one day and you go, oh, I remember what dad taught me, what mom taught me, and you kind of snap out of it, you know, and you kind of end up back in the...
Grow up.
You grow up. Yeah, maybe at 22, you know, or something, you grow up a little bit. So, was there anything to ring back? You know? And again, does the father or the mother have any influence still at all in these people's lives? There's some judgment there. Oh, let me ask a question in Titus 3. How do we, when it says in verse 5, or verse 6, and that his children are believers, what does it mean to be a believer?
Because you can believe and reject too, right? I mean, just believing like factually.
What have you taught them?
Yeah, how do I know if someone's children are believers? I mean, if this is asking me to seek out people for the eldership role, and it's telling me to look for these qualities, how do I know if someone's children are believers or not?
How they come to them.
Faithful.
What makes someone faithful?
Believe in Jesus.
How do I know if somebody believes in
This is
Jesus?
the New Testament.
How do we know if somebody believes in Jesus? How do I know if this is true?
By their actions.
Yeah, I think and I'd love to hear the thoughts, especially the elders in the room, but I think the church over the years has come to the conclusion that the only way you can really know that is have they put on Christ in baptism or not? That's the demonstration that someone's a believer, is it not? That's why we talked about baptism.
Right.
That's where did someone actually consummate the...
Right. They've actually
The
followed
marriage.
through.
Yeah, did they follow through?
Right.
And
You know.
and did they continue?
And did they continue? Right? I mean, how else are we going to know that? So we've kind of said, well, I mean, if your children haven't even been baptized, it's like, well, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
it
we
doesn't
all
look-
know people that were even brought up in the church,
Yeah.
that went to church, you saw them on Sundays, and you're just kind of glad you didn't know the backstory and what they did at home because it really wasn't a good story. So that could be that too.
Yeah. But I mean, what am I going to do? Am I going to sit down? Am I going to sit down with every one of Ron's children and interview each one and verify that each one were believers?
Right.
No. What are you going to do? Is you're going to say, well, Ron, have your children put on Christ in baptism? And have they,
Right.
are they members of the church, of the Lord's church? That's an easy answer. It's an easy thing to see, right? Not whether somebody is sinless. It's not saying sinless children, right? None of us are sinless, right? It's talking about are they part of the body? Are they believers, part of the body? How do you become part of the body? Declare Christ as the Son of God and put on Christ in baptism. That's how that's where we've come. So generally speaking, the mainstream church, the Church of Christ especially, will look at a few things. Are these people, respectable in the church? Do they conduct themselves well? Are they thought well of in the body? Are they able to teach? Right? Are they participating in the spreading of the gospel and the message? Contributing to the congregation? Are they married with a wife at home to keep them kind of, in
Grounded.
balance?
Yeah.
And has he produced a family that is believers? That's it. That boils it all down.
So I have a thought. So when they started the church, when the first church started, and you were whatever, pagan, whatever, you were Jew, that you did it, there's no way you could have qualified for it unless your family, your children had become baptized. And then, you could go down a rabbit hole with that one. That you could say, did you do this, husband of one wife, you're temperate, you're not a drunkard, blah, 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 bad. But the other part, the history part of where they came from, they hadn't had a chance to even
Well-
start knowing all that.
Yeah, remember too, we tend to look at things through our prism of the modern culture and the
Right.
modern society.
This
Right.
applies to us.
So
Yeah.
let's look at through our modern prism for a second. I mean, my world, it's my kids grew up, they all moved out. They all live separate homes, separate places, separate states. They spread all over the place. That's what we produce as a society today,
Mhm.
right? Now I can choose to go, I'm done with you. You know, you're on your own, right? Or I can still choose to
Keep part
work
of their
through
life.
that and keep it part of our lives. Look back at this time. Do you think that happened back then? Do you think people just went off and just?
Not
I mean,
usually.
I don't think so. It was much more of a tribal community. Remember, it was more agrarian than it is today. So there was more. You know, we read about someone and his entire household being baptized,
Mhm.
right? Well, who was he baptizing? Just the kids?
Nope, even servants,
It was the whole. Who was the whole household? I mean, who was the household?
even the people that work for them.
I mean, I would say it was the whole household was
Everybody.
his whole family.
Yeah.
His whole family. I love to break down the word household, who it's talking about, but it's talking about the whole family.
Mhm.
And if we're going to go baptizing children, well, that's not what the Bible teaches. So it has to be people old enough to believe. Well, that means we're talking about grown kids,
Right.
right? So it looks like we're talking about a household. We're talking about your sphere of influence.
Mhm.
You know, now if you've chosen to let your adult kids just go, well, we talk about that. That's
Well, you know, transportation, it used to be when you left home, people may not ever see you again. I mean, when people from the east went west, there weren't even telephones.
Or
So-
letters, yeah.
So,
Thank goodness we don't have to deal with that now.
Yeah. So I mean, again, kind of what we described. It's looking for people. Did they make a impression, and are they guiding in the direction of their children's lives, or are they just not able to influence even the people that are closest to them? That's really what it's asking. Yes, sir.
So you're talking about qualifying and quantifying. Are you saying that, because we've talked about how they have to have a wife, I'm understanding that this means they have to have children, because how could we see how they manage your household if they don't have
Exactly.
children?
If you've
Right.
never had a job before, how are you going to do in this job?
Right.
So remember, we talk about it as a resume, right? Well, I'm going to be a great supervisor. I've never been one before. I've never worked with people before, but I know I'll be a great one.
Evidence.
Take a chance on me.
Yeah.
Roll the dice on me. And if you decide to roll the dice on me and I go bad, who owns that?
Yeah.
The one who rolled the dice on me.
You can't leave your children, how are you gonna leave a
Yeah.
conversation?
Yeah, who are strangers. Like what? And I love you, but what influence do I have in your life? Right? You can say, Drew, you're great. I'm not following you. But if you're my daughter, we have a different relationship. That's trusting. And if I can't influence you through the 25, 30 years we've been together, well, how am I going to influence you and I've known for 2 years?
Mhm.
You know, that I don't see except once a week, you know? Yes.
It doesn't really say, but wouldn't you say that it was the apostles that came up with the qualifications?
Oh, well, now we're talking about the inspired nature of the
Right.
scriptures now. So is this just Paul writing his own thoughts? to Titus?
No.
Where did these thoughts come from?
God.
Spirit, right? So,
Well, like everything they wrote.
right.
So that's what
I
it-
mean, you can't sit and say, I love what the scriptures say, but those qualifications are not real. That's just Paul.
Yeah.
I've had discussions with Christian friends before. That's just Pauline stuff. Anything Paul writes doesn't. I've had that debate with him before. It's like, okay, now we're in a completely different.
Well, that means you
World.
take that chunk of the Bible that he wrote, which is quite
Yeah.
a lot,
Yeah, right.
because it's
Yeah.
not God inspired.
I mean, I think it's really helpful for us because we're trying to understand how to build a church, and he's writing to people that were building a church.
Yeah.
Here's how you build a church. Let's follow these. Here's some good guidelines for you to build a church.
Mhm.
We're going to do it ourselves and make it up. Good luck with that. Hey, John, do you have a thought?
Talk about building a church, or we're saying building a local congregation. If you have a congregation, I know churches that are this way. They feel like, having an eldership, that's kind of a hassle. Why don't we just go ahead and just do business the way we're doing it? We don't need elders. But you look at the text here. He says in verse 5, put in order things that are lacking. So if you're a congregation that says we don't ever need to get elders, you're lacking. You need elders. That's the goal of every local congregation. Should have elders.
It should, it really should.
As long as you can find men that are qualified.
Yeah.
Put them in there. And if a man is qualified, but he meets one qualification, or doesn't meet one qualification, that is, desires the office, you need to work with those men to desire the office, to desire to be elders. You
So
know?
does a church dissolve if there's no qualified, I mean, should a church dissolve
No.
if there?
No.
No, it can be run by,
But for how long, if they're not actively pursuing
There's no
leadership?
there's no time limit put on how long.
Yeah,
but
that's very, I mean, again, that's what we're kind of saying. I think the Titus letter is good for that because it actually says, "This is why I left you in Crete." So Titus is kind of looking after things and trying to get him to this point, right? And Paul's helping him. You can see Paul's writing and helping him. So there's a job, there's an effort being done here.
Well, and
Like,
if
to
you're
try
in
and
a
get
if you're in a small town, and you only have so many people that are attending that church, if you dissolve that church, where are they going to go? If it's the only church in that town, the only church of Christ. So, like in Wickenburg, there's not another church of Christ. There's just this
They don't have
one.
automobiles up there in Wickenburg? Can't
Well,
drive down
you're
to
right.
Chicago?
They could go, but would they? Would they drive down? I don't know.
How much you love the body? I mean, is that my reason? They never come down to,
But what
they
I'm
never come down
saying
to shop and
is,
surprise.
if you're saying that we shouldn't be a church in Wickenburg because we don't have elders, then
Oh, you said where do they go?
yeah.
Where'd they go?
But
Did they
if
never
you're-
leave Wickenburg for anything?
No,
They
but I
just
mean,
horse and buggy
I'm
and
talking
find that
Wickenburg. So in other small towns that are hours away from, you live in Montana or somewhere.
We need
that's-
to, the body needs to look at a plan of
Yeah,
church up there.
and you can
How
try
will
to
we
do
know?
it, but especially in a smaller town like Wickenburg. When Rod started going there was 15, and 13 of them were women, and 2 of them were men who were in their late 80s.
I think it is kind of
Yeah.
funny how, those are people you cared for and looked after. There's zero doubt
Right.
about that. There's a good ministry. Take a limo up and pick the old folks up in Wickenburg and bring them to church. I don't know.
Yeah,
But people will drive over to Arrowhead to get their hair done,
right.
once a week, but they won't drive more, because there isn't church within 5 minutes of my house, so I'm not gonna go. I mean, I come on. I just not. Not gonna,
Well, and there's been men that, Rob was the chief cook and bottle washer. He led the class, he led all the songs, led all the prayers, preached. He served the communion by himself. And so that over these 15 years, there's been men that have come in that Rob has kind of guided into leading prayers. And even if they just stand up where they're sitting and lead a prayer,
Yeah.
that's something. We have a gentleman now that
Yeah.
wants to be the song leader, and so bless his heart, he tries
Yeah.
really hard.
Part of my job is that whenever I had a supervisor when I got was developing the young people
Right.
to
Step
replace
in.
me someday,
Right.
to grow. And I'm always looking for where's the next lead, where's the next coach, where's the next supervisor in this group, who's got the talent and willingness and
Right.
the demeanor that I can develop for that. And sometimes you got to bring someone in because the people here are lacking, so you bring someone else in, you train them, and that's this whole idea of supervisor. We're talking about that. That's a modern word, but overwatcher, overseer is kind of a supervisor type of thing.
but a congregation can be ruled with elders in thought, as long as you've got some good stable people who start a congregation and then they progressively get to the point to where they can have elders, but everything is kind of ruled on a
Committee.
committee of men, and there's issues there too, because you have no head leader, but, prayer and all of that during the meeting if things get hot. But just wait until there is a time.
They look like they're in Titus there, like they're trying to get.
That's
Is
right.
there a desire? Are they trying to get there? Are they working on it? Are they praying
Right.
about it? Don't you think God will provide that avenue
Absolutely.
for them?
Absolutely.
Or you're just happy with the men's meeting because this works for us, right?
Well, and
that's not striving.
there's more involvement from the congregation
Yes.
than I've ever been part of, because these men will make the decision and then they approach the whole congregation. We have a meeting, and we do it every 3 months, have a meeting. So then we present all these things to the membership and ask them. And so there's more input to that congregation from the rest of us.
It's not a scriptural model, but
Yeah.
if it works for you,
Yeah.
good luck.
Well, it takes time. It takes
Yeah.
time to grow.
Mhm.
But as long as you can keep it together while it's growing to the point to where they can have elders, and that's great. But it took a long time
Yeah, might take a while. Doesn't say how long Titus was
Right.
hanging out in Crete to
Right.
accomplish
But
that.
it's all scriptural and done the way the Lord wants.
He might have moved there as a missionary, and he's gonna stay there
Right.
for a long time to get that church up, and it's striving towards that. It's not saying, oh, this works for us, so we're gonna leave it like that.
Right.
You gotta say, yeah, it's working right now, but because we're not following the scriptural direction, we own this thing.
Right.
If and when it might go bad, so.
And the minister and the deacons have the qualifications too, so
Yeah,
I feel
the two-
like they can step in when there's not someone there.
Yeah, kinda like what George was
Yeah,
describing.
exactly.
And good tease, because next week, we're gonna talk deacons and ministers, evangelists. So, yeah, good stuff. Good conversation, folks. I encourage you to go back and read, just go back and search for elder, overseer in the New Testament, read about it, see where it's being used, look at Timothy and Titus, and just think on it. And that helps explain why, we're pursuing these different avenues, because, again, we're trying to emulate the first century, and this is the way they were laid out in the first century to do. So trying to achieve that, and we'll be on a good path. Thanks so much, folks. Appreciate your input. Thanks for your conversation. See you next time.